Hey, Betsy here for the American Intelligence Media, and Thomas isn't with me, but I have an amazing friend, Michael McKibben, the founder and CEO of Leader Technologies. And this is a little audio I have been wanting to do for a while, but there were so many important things about Michael we wanted to do first before we got into this topic. And this is about entrepreneurship. Now, Michael, I used to belong to an organization before I retired called Entrepreneur Organization, and big shout out to the amazing folks at EO. This organization brings together entrepreneurs all over the world and helps and supports them through peer-to-peer networking, counseling, well, not counseling, but sharing to help entrepreneurs navigate the very challenging waters of growing their business. And it's not an easy thing, Michael, to have a business, grow a business. You know, you get these great ideas. I mean, entrepreneurs are creators, we're innovators, we're dynamos, and we get these ideas and, we think that we're going to take it worldwide, and it's just a very exciting place to be. Well, I retired and left EO, but kept a lot of my friends and certainly kept my enthusiasm about being an entrepreneur. And so it's no surprise then that Thomas and I started the American Intelligence Media so that we could give folks news in a different kind of platform, a different way. And along the way, we met you, Michael, and we heard your story. We heard your story about Leader Technologies. First, we started reading it. It was quite dense. It was horrific. As I read your story, as an entrepreneur, I was just devastated because the story told me that you were an entrepreneur, much like all the entrepreneurs that I worked with in EO. And in the end, a very corrupt system in Washington suppressed your creativity, stole your wealth, and has just turned what you created into an abomination of something that we have explored as digital tyranny or digital fascism. So today I'd like to talk to you, Michael, about what it was like to be an entrepreneur, to have created this amazing invention, what kind of struggles you went through, and what is the result. And then we're going to wrap it up by letting entrepreneurs know what our message is to them as they go forward. Michael, what is it that you invented?
Well, first of all, Betsy, one of the things I find about talking to you is your enthusiasm is contagious. And that, in essence, I think is one of the things that separates entrepreneurs from other people in a way, is the level of enthusiasm you have to pursue an idea, because there are lots of stages in the creation of a new idea, new service, new product, and your enthusiasm is just contagious. Thank you.
Yeah, they say you can't educate. In colleges they have these entrepreneurship classes, and that's all well and good, but baby, you either have it or you don't. Isn't that right?
It seems that way, yeah.
So what is it that you invented? Because some folks that may be listening to this may not have caught up with your story.
Wow, okay. So let me summarize by saying, and I don't want to kind of overwhelm people, but what we have now determined that we invented is social networking. And that the entire market that exists today in social networking was founded on our invention, which I started working on in earnest in 1997 when I formed Leader Technologies. And entrepreneurship has always been a subject of interest to me because as an engineer, I kind of like to figure things out and break them down to their components, and have developed a view of what it takes to really be successful at doing anything, at creating a new idea, writing something, whatever it is. There are a set of elements, and I think I break them down to three. You've got to have a vision, you've got to have a plan to get there, and you've got to infuse it with the enthusiasm that it takes to pursue those three. And those three go together. It's like a trinity. And that if you have, you think you have an idea and you have half a plan and no enthusiasm, well, guess what? That's not going to happen. So that has been something that I've actually written a lot about in the area of leadership. And I used to do a lot of work in organizational development where I did a lot of problem solving and facilitated groups to get through very difficult problems. And in the process, what I learned in working with groups across the board in industry, in government, in commerce, in banking, you name it, I saw that there was a common thread of how people solve problems and create things. And it really didn't matter what the topic was. These elements of vision, implementation, and enthusiasm were essential if you were going to achieve anything.
You know, I've seen so many entrepreneurs along the years. They have a great idea, and then they've got to get the funding together. So a lot of them were bootstrapping, were borrowing money from our relatives, were doing what it takes, trying to pull together teams, trying to keep employees, motivate them, trying to find key employees, I guess was probably a
Right.
really big challenge for you doing
Always.
what you did. So those are the kinds of things that entrepreneurs are doing. And then you did that. When you started out, when did you have this idea? How did that all percolate of what you were going to create?
Prior to 97, when I started Leader Technologies, I had a management consulting company, organizational development, and did a lot of work in corporate training, goal setting, time management, key problem-solving skills, that kind of thing. And in the process of doing that, the PC market started hitting. And so I found myself spending more and more time consulting with how groups use computers. So I decided to stop just talking about it and actually jump in and start doing software development. So I did a number of software programs where I actually raised the money, hired people to do programming for me in the area of what's now called Salesforce automation, in goal setting, in executive information systems. And then while I was doing that, I was introduced to people at AT&T who were having a very serious problem with their email system. And they were, I think, kind of at wit's end as a corporation because they didn't know how to fix it, because they had to have a solution in 6 months that Bell Labs was telling them was going to take 3 years and $6 million. And to cut a long story short, we did the project and completed it on time with $1 million in 6 months. And so that pretty much put me on the map as somebody who could take an idea from inception and actually implement it and put it out on the market quickly. So in the process of doing that, I started working with all of AT&T's divisions and all of their key customers, and it was their messaging product called AT&T Access Plus. And we took their product, which was a DOS product, which is, if you remember Microsoft DOS, and moved it into Windows 95 in time for the launch of Windows 95. And so in the process of doing that, another approach to messaging was starting to become popular at the time, and it was called groupware. And people may know the names Lotus Notes or Microsoft Exchange or Novell GroupWise. Those were the thoughts that the big companies were pursuing as how they were going to implement collaboration in a large-scale environment, and especially through the internet. And in supporting all those clients and systems, I began to see that that was pursuing the wrong path and they wouldn't be able to do what they wanted to do. So at that point, the project at AT&T was over, and that's when I formed Leader, specifically to tackle this problem of how is collaboration going to occur in this new scaled environment called the internet. And if you recall, back then, that was when the browser wars were occurring, where Netscape was fighting with Microsoft and Internet Explorer, and nobody knew who was even going to win that battle at that time. So there wasn't a commercial market for it yet. So that's why we basically went underground. I hired my own technologist.
Now, why did you go underground? What gave you a feeling that you needed to be protective of what you were doing?
Good point. As an idea guy, I'm kind of an idea guy. And the one thing I had learned in life is that most people are not that way. And what I was seeing with the AT&T employees is they loved to have meetings with me, because what I've learned is that they were sucking me for ideas. And so I would, most of the time, see my ideas implemented within months of me telling somebody at T&T about it, and they didn't even send me a thank you note.
Wow.
So what I said, look, I'm not going to tell anybody this idea. And that's why we decided very consciously to go underground. In fact, it was so conscious that I had done a lot of entrepreneurial talks in Columbus with the Entrepreneurship Institute. That's not the name. I can't remember what we call it.
Well,
It was the
just
Chamber
to
of
say
Commerce.
this, the entrepreneur organization in Columbus, Ohio, they need to reach out to you and have you come in and speak to those young entrepreneurs. You have so much to share.
Well, I used to do that, and then until I went underground in 97. I used to do a lot of those kind of talks. But the one thing I realized is that if I was going to maintain any kind of value with this idea that I had, I couldn't go telling people about it. That was just an instinct plus an experience, and I was tired of having people rip me off. And so we very consciously went underground. I told the director of this Chamber of Commerce organization, his name is Frank. I said, Frank, I want you to know that you're not going to hear from me for years. And I don't want you to think that it had anything to do with you or anything else, or my interest in the organization. But I've got an idea, and I want to protect it, and I'm going to hire some people, and we're not going to talk about what we're doing. We're just going to do it. And then when I give you a call one day, we will be ready to tell the world about it.
So from the very beginning, you knew you had to protect your
Absolutely.
idea. So you went from the very beginning.
From day
you
one.
protected your, and then you developed this.
Yes.
And what was the next step of protecting your incredible idea after you had developed it?
Well, I want to tell you that I finally called Frank one day in 2002. In 2002, so from
Wow.
97 2002, I said, Frank, I'm ready to talk. That's
you
how long
should have-
it took.
You should have talked to Mark Zuckerberg. Apparently, he did it over a break or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was an inside joke. Now, look, folks, there is so much of Michael's story to tell. And if you will look in the description box, you will see a 6-part interview we did with him about Leader Technologies. And so we don't want to revisit all of that. We want to fast forward to this point where, okay, you knew you had an amazing idea, and you knew, because you want to protect your
Right.
idea, you're an entrepreneur, you're in America.
Exactly.
You're going to do the next step, which a lot of us out here and entrepreneurs pay attention. Michael then took the next step to find a patent attorney.
Right. So by the time that we had the magic aha moment in 99, which was almost 3 years later, the internet wasn't still a commercial it was only about 10 million users. I mean, Google had only been out a couple of years, and it was still too early to try to commercialize the idea. So we knew we needed to protect the idea, and so I sought out the best patent attorney that I could find. Now, entrepreneurs kind of think big, and one of the things that in one of the speeches I gave to the Chamber of Commerce back in the early 90s, I was talking on entrepreneurship, and afterwards, one of the professors of of computer science at Ohio State came up to me afterwards, and he said, Mike, I understand you went to Ohio State and studied civil engineering. And I said, yeah, I did. And he said, I really love civil engineers. And this was a computer guy. And I said, really, why? He said, because you guys think so big. He said, we spend all our time looking down a microscope and looking at electronic boards and designs and very small things and very tiny implementations of things. And he said, civil engineers, they think broadly, they have to think long term, sometimes 5 or 10 years out, because you go from a concept to a high-rise building, and it takes a long time, and you have to think ahead. And he says, that's one thing I like about civil engineers, is you think big.
Well, you are a big thinker. I mean, think about the social media platform that Leader Technologies, should I say designed, innovated? What is the word I'm looking for? Invented. I mean, that's huge. It's worldwide. It affects all of our lives, from commerce to uploading baby pictures. It's an amazing. Now, did you see that vision when you started out?
One of the things in design is you don't often see the solution, but you know what the problem is, and that was our case. I knew from my AT&T experiences at supporting them what the problems were, but we didn't know what the solutions were because the market was marching down the groupware solution path. And at some point, I recognized that wasn't it. But we didn't know what it was. And so what I actually had to do was invent a new way of brainstorming. Not a new way, but I was borrowing pieces and parts from different approaches to brainstorming to come up with a way of solving this problem that worked. And it had to think pretty big because we're talking about a network that's covering the planet. And I didn't want to think about a little solution that would be implemented only within a pharmaceutical division of a big, multinational company, and that I would package that up and sell 50 packages of that to some company for $10,000 each, and that was it. No, I said, let's just solve the whole problem. Now, that's the civil engineer in me.
No, that's
why not just fix everything?
Those are entrepreneurs. They jump out of the plane with or without parachutes.
Yeah. Well, we did that, and so that was one of the elements. And the other element was one of the things that you learn about working with programmers and technologists in the computer field is it's like herding cats, because most of the time these guys have more education than you do. And they all have ideas, and they're never wrong. I mean, it's just certain personality types that do programming well, and then there are levels within that of people who kind of do bread and butter programming, and some of the guys that can reach for the heights, but they don't stay there that long, and so you don't want to count on them for your grinding it out portion of your solution. So you've got to really design the people that you're using to work on this to the task at hand. And so I actually designed a team, and I literally would put that team up against anything that Microsoft or IBM or Novell had. And I hired them, and they were all from Columbus. They all lived in Columbus. And I basically hired them with the task as, guys, we are going to work on this problem, and I'm going to drive it. And I went out and raised the money. We've raised over $20 million from little investors. We don't have one institutional investor in our company.
I mean, entrepreneurs out there are just going, wow, you raised $20 million. Yeah. Do you know so many of them have to, in
$25,000 chunks, I might add.
Yes, this is amazing. So that was a lot of work. I'm just hearing you. You protected it. You had a great idea.
So there was a lot of issues related to securities law, a lot of accounting issues, a lot of issues to pay attention to when you're kind of want to protect an idea and don't want to involve third parties that could potentially steal your idea. So we had to do a lot of work to design this company as well as design the product. And they had to go hand in hand because the company supported the design of the product, which ended up resulting in social networking.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but entrepreneurs have a very short attention span. Generally, most of them are ADHD, and so they want to bounce on to the next subject. So that's what we're going to do, Michael, okay?
Okay.
I want to get to the point that we know your product worked. I mean, who doesn't Google and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all of that?
Every time you post a photo, you're using our technology.
It's your technology we're using, so we know how fabulous it is. You must be a multi-gazillionaire, and all along the way you must have thought, wow, I'm living the American dream. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in a great country, and now I'm going to go to the next step. I'm going to make sure that everything we develop, because it works now, is protected.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs think, that they live in a country where the laws are going to protect them. And your story is not the only story I've heard since we've started this. We are hearing more and more from people with free energy devices, other technologies, and they are having the same issue. So let's go to the issue that an entrepreneur needs to be very aware of. And guys out there, if you're listening, consider that this is Tyler, and I'm in your forum, and we're doing some experience share here about what happened to one individual in the patent system.
Right. Well, I don't know where to jump into that, because now I can see things that I couldn't see then. But I don't know whether to start out with what I assumed and have learned since is not the case. But one of the things about intellectual property is that's a legal construct. And it's in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. Clause 6, I think, and it protects copyrights and patents, and it's the only property right written into the Constitution. So I sought out the best patent attorney I could find. And through various network introductions, I met a man in Washington, D.C. who was advising Bill Clinton, the Congress, the judiciary, all the key large corporations. And I thought, well, this is it. This is the guy that knows how to protect intellectual property. His name is Professor James P. Chandler III. And so went and met with him, and on the spot, he agreed to come on our board and help us protect our trade secrets at that time. It was way before we filed a patent. And there's a long story after that, but basically Professor Chandler almost immediately, this was in early 2000, flew out to Columbus, was in some key design meetings, and one of those photos from that meeting is in the Miller Act request, by the way. So you can see him sitting in the far back right corner with his assistant, Kelly. And so on paper, I had the best advice I could get. What I have now learned about the whole legal system related to intellectual property is it's a big scam. And it's a big scam by the large corporations to, by hook or crook, one way or another, steal the ideas of real idea creators and get them into the large corporations in order to maintain their market dominance.
Because what they're doing is they know your type, Michael.
Exactly.
You're a creator. You're focused in on all of this. What they're busy doing is figuring out crafty, clever ways to steal what you have, because they're not creators. So here he was laying in wait, really waiting for someone like you. And I'm sure he's done this to other people before. Mm-hmm. So there you are. He already knows how he's going to handle your case. And what have you found typically happens in this situation? Without naming particular names, can you give an entrepreneur an overview what happens once you submit a patent and one of these patent trolls get a hold of you?
Well, there's some steps before that.
Okay.
When you first have an idea, and presuming you haven't disclosed it to the public, it's a trade secret. And a trade secret is a protectable property. So if you haven't told anybody, like the Coke formula or something like that's the one everybody typically uses. But it's any set of ideas that are unique to you that you have not disclosed to third parties, and you've taken reasonable means to protect them. That's the legal terms. And so you've got to do that, because if you get excited about something, you go out and tell somebody or tell a newspaper, that idea is gone, because once it becomes public, you can't protect it any longer. So the trade secrets was the whole, and Professor Chandler wrote the Federal Trade Secrets Act in 1996. So how could I do better than the guy who wrote the law on how to protect trade secrets? So we basically took his advice on how to protect the trade secret. What I now understand is he really wanted us to protect our trade secret so that his group of cronies in the deep state would have a protected idea when they stole it. So it was all a confidence trick. So anyway, we actually paid him for this. So we paid him well over $500,000 in legal fees to protect this. So when we finally got the technology to the point where it was actually working, that's when he ostensibly assisted us in filing our provisional patent. And that was at the same time that the IBM Eclipse Foundation, we now know, was busy taking our source code and feeding it out the back door to the whole tech world, including all the cardboard cutouts in Silicon Valley, including Microsoft and IBM. So while we were doing the things according to the book, as we were told, they were out there in parallel pursuing our technology and implementing it in this global takeover of the internet, basically.
Right, and we've done a lot of videos and articles about that. So if folks are interested, they can look in the description box, and I've put some of those key articles down there.
Right. Yeah, so there's some steps in filing a patent. You can file a provisional patent, or you can, and that gives you another year to flesh it out further and then file your formal patent, or you can just go ahead and file your formal patent. And then after that, there's a whole examination process that occurs within the patent office. It's all fairly secret. It's not very transparent on how they do this. You're assigned an examiner, and that examiner then looks at all your claims, and those claims have to be written in a fairly legalistic way, because what a patent is basically is a property deed. It literally, in many ways, is just like a deed that you would have on a piece of property. It describes the coordinates of the boundaries and the terrain and the topography, all of that. So that's what a patent does. And so with intellectual property like software, a patent has to be written in a certain way, and there's a certain jargon that goes along with it to get that done. Well, once we let Professor Chandler go, we got another patent attorney who actually did a good job, and he actually wrote it so that it was in fact issued in 2006. So during that whole process between the time you file, which we did in 2002 to 2006, you're going back and forth with the patent examiner who's studying the prior art to make sure there's nothing out there that you're actually copying, and that your invention is not only novel, it's also non-obvious. Which these are two technical terms. So you might have a novel idea, but if it's just the next logical step in a series of ideas, that's not patentable. So it's got to be not only novel, it's got to be non-obvious. So it's not something that everybody in the marketplace would have invented if it weren't for yours, or instead of yours. So we went through all that, a lot of examination, a lot of back and forth, and anybody that thinks that process is trivial is succumbing to the this troll negative PR that has been laid on entrepreneurs and inventors, that they're just trolling and they're taking away the ideas from the big corporations. That is all propaganda by the big corporations to further discourage inventors from actually trying to protect their intellectual property. So you go through that whole process, and in the end, you could be denied because the process may find that there was some prior art out there that you weren't aware of out in Moldova or somewhere like that. I mean, that's how far you have to go with this. And then once you get through that whole process, if you get awarded a patent, that is supposed to be a property.
Okay, but let's talk about the guts here. That didn't happen for you.
No, it did happen. We got a patent.
Okay, you got a patent. But
we got 3 patents.
All right, but what happened that you don't have the full use of what you created?
What was going on in parallel, we've now learned in the last 2 to 3 years, is what was going on in parallel was that Professor Chandler had taken our source code, which he had in custody in a escrow agreement, and fed it out to the IBM Eclipse Foundation, who then turned around and fed it out to the whole tech world to build the social networking, social media environment. That was all happening in parallel to the work in the patent office. So by the time we got our patent, they were already on a roll. This was 2006. And if you remember, Barack Obama announced his candidacy on Facebook in February 2007. So by then, they had taken our technology and they were already on a roll with the Internet of Things.
They saw what you had, and they knew they needed that
to
roll out all these products that were just sitting there waiting for you.
Right.
You and your big idea.
They basically gave brand names to various market segments in their use of the same social technology. So they had a common social technology with, by the way, a common backdoor to the intelligence community, with all kind of different brand names: Google, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, you name it. Plus, all the government agencies used the technology for their implementations, as did the healthcare world, as did the pharmacy world. So the idea was we're going to make it look like there's this diverse set of products out there, but in fact, we're controlling everything. That was what we now can see they were doing while we were out there working and thinking we were doing the right things as entrepreneurs to get our patents. So when we got our patent in November of 2006, we were very excited.
Oh, okay.
We got a patent. And presumably, I don't know for a fact, but presumably the patent examiner herself did not know about this other plan. So what we've learned is the deep state doesn't necessarily control everybody. They just control the mechanisms of power when they need to. So we got the patent, and we then said, okay, well, who are we going to sue? Because we could see everybody was using it, and so we worked with a very large law firm and decided to sue Facebook. So that's what we did in November 2008, and then proceeded to.
But of course, we don't hear about that case. It wasn't in the news. What we get is a little movie about the mystical beginnings of Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. We get Winklevoss, what are they?
Winklevoss.
We get that trial blown up in our face. It's almost like they were trying to distract us at that time about the real inventor of social media and your case. Because I had never heard about it until I had stumbled onto your site.
Right. Well, that's how effective propaganda is.
Yes.
They had a meme that basically created this movie called Social Networking. They pushed that meme out into the marketplace, and nobody asked any more questions. And I mean, one of the most obvious questions that nobody asked is that Zuckerberg actually claimed in court testimony in the Winklevoss case that he built the entire Facebook platform in 1 to 2 weeks while he's studying for finals at Harvard in 2003, early 2004.
Such a cockamamie story.
No, anybody that's in engineering,
millions of dollars and so many hours of professional technological
650,000 lines of source code, and 145,000 man hours of programming. That's what it really took at the time. And he's claiming he did it in a week and a half while he was drinking and studying for finals. But nobody asked any critical question. Well, probably people did, but what we saw is the media was on board. The mainstream media was on board with the social networking meme. And so why? Because they all benefited also from the platform. NBC, CBS, they all jumped into the social media crowd. They pushed their propaganda out through the mechanism as well. So they were bought off. So the reason you never heard anything, and that was one of the questions we got, well, if you have such great claims, how come we haven't heard them? Well, why would they say anything? Because they're benefiting from the theft as well.
Right. And how do people hear about things anyway? They think that they're going to get the news in their newspapers or their digital platforms. And if it's all controlled by the very people that
stole it,
you're not going to hear about it.
Right.
Now, Michael, I'm going to close up here. But if you are an entrepreneur out there and you belong to an organization like EO or maybe even YPO or the Women Presidents Organization, you are missing out big time not to invite Michael McKibben to come in to speak to you in either your forum, your chapters, your conference, your large conferences. He has so much incredible information that can be shared with all entrepreneurs. And because of his bravery in coming out and doing that 6-part series with us, his name is really out there now, and it has made other people a little bit more comfortable in coming forward. We have heard incredible stories from people in the energy sector who've come up with energy that could put the petrochemical industry out of business. But do you think that that's going to come? Absolutely not with this corrupt system. Last word, Michael, what do you have to say to the entrepreneurs out there?
Well, I think that beware of the patent system. The patent system is there to be a toy box for the large corporations. The companies who are guaranteeing their success in what is coming to be called a fascist system. They've teamed up with the government, and the government has agreed to turn a blind eye on any kind of protections legally for a person's ideas when those ideas are desired by their friends. And so the patent system is corrupt to the core. And so don't even bother putting your ideas out there, because by the time it makes it out of the examination process and is first published, any idea that group wants has already been implemented by the major players. And you may get toyed with, they may throw you a bone, but the bottom line is that's not a way to protect your ideas. Now, the question is, what is? And that is an open question right now in our corrupt system, because the courts are not protecting entrepreneurs.